guys, and welcome back to It Girl in Review. It's me, Jay Gibson here, and today we're going to be discussing Anora. Now, to be honest, this review is going to be a little bit difficult for me because I'll just cut it short. This isn't a good movie. To me, this is the weakest movie out of the Oscar Best Actress nominations. Now, first things first, Anora is not on streaming services as I could find right now, so I had to rent it on Apple TV. It costs about $6, I believe, to rent this movie for 48 hours. Is it worth that $6? No. This movie, I was surprised, was in theaters. Like, I watched it with my best friend on our TV, and we were like, this seems like a Netflix movie. This doesn't seem like it could withhold being in theaters.
Hi, I'm Annie. Hi, I'm Annie. You don't have cash? Let's go to the ATM. We can go chill out in a private room.
Быть эксклюзивно со мной?
15. Cash up front.
We should marry.
And do you, Anora, take this handsome gentleman to New York?
Да я был с ним 2 недели назад буквально. Он не жена.
Они написали, что она проститутка, блядь.
You go fuck yourself and your fucking mother, motherfucker!
Now, if you want my opinion, go to the end of the video as usual and listen to my opinion of this movie. But you already know, I did not find this movie well made overall. Okay, now before we start, make sure you guys like, subscribe, and follow me here on YouTube, Spotify if you're listening to that as well, because it's only listening on Spotify, no watching. So if you want to just listen to me talk about movies, head over to Spotify and follow me on there, and you can always be updated every week and just listen to my voice while you're driving or doing laundry. Now, the overview. Anora, a young woman from Brooklyn, gets her chance at a Cinderella story when she meets and marries the son of an oligarch. Once the news reaches Russia, her fairy tale is threatened as the parents set out for New York to get the marriage annulled. So with the cast, I'll be only talking about the main cast members of this movie. I won't be talking about any side characters or anything like that as per usual. The main character is Annie, played by Mikey Madison. Vanya or Ivan, played by Mark E. Bodyguard 1 is Vosh. Bodyguard 2 is Igor. So I'll just be using Bodyguard 1, Bodyguard 2. All right? The last main character we'll be discussing is Toros, played by Karen K. So those are the 5 characters I'll be talking about today. I won't be going over anyone else really. I may bring up a mom or a dad here or there, but these are the 5 characters that you really should be caring about. For the next maybe 15 minutes, I'll only be talking about Annie and Ivan or Vanya. So I'll just call the person Vanya. To make it simple, the guy. Then I'll add the other 3 I just named, who are Toros, Bodyguard 1, and Bodyguard 2. Got it? Got it? All right, great. Also, this movie, 2 hours and 19 minutes, this freaking movie. I cannot catch a break. I feel like I complain about this every single week now. Why are all these movies over 2 hours long? It's not necessary. Sorry, the script, the writing, the acting, the plot does not warrant these movies to be over 2 hours long. But sitting on my couch, I don't want to sit there for 2 hours, especially for this movie. This is the weakest movie out of the Oscar nominations so far. The weakest. Now let's begin. So we start this movie in the strip club. With this strip club, I found that this is supposed to be in somewhere in New York City. And if you watch 304 Talk, you kind of heard this instance as well as I have before. Most strip clubs are going to essentially label their nights if they have a diverse group of girls who are strippers, especially in metropolitan cities. You have one club if you want to see your black girls. You have one club if you want to see your Latina girls. You have one club if you want to see your white girls. You have one club if you want to see a specific type of white girl, or if this is diverse clientele and a diverse group of strippers, you have, okay, this is Latina night. This is black girl night. This is white girl night. This is high class night. They have different nights. And looking at this strip club, it looks like an expensive and nice strip club. So I was like, okay, they have a diverse group of girls, but whoever the writers and creators of this movie are, which I believe is a man and a woman, they must not be well versed in like strip culture. Because if you're like American, you go to a lot of strip clubs. Like you've been to plenty of strip clubs, you've seen plenty of strippers. So you and if you even are on 3 or 4 Talk and just listen to all the strippers and dancers and hear what their experiences at these clubs, you are a bit more aware than the creators. So we're at the dancer club and we see Annie. Annie is dancing, doing her 1-2. See her in her natural habitat. We see her giving private dances, lap dances, going around the dancer club and trying to pick up new guys who maybe are intimidated, and she's trying to finesse them to come to the private room so she can give them a private dance. It's kind of like you're watching the art of a working girl. So we see throughout that night Annie and some of the other dancer girls interacting, things like that. Nothing special happens. Oh, I will want to point out, the beginning credits were not long this time. Thank you. After taking a break, Annie, she's sitting in the dressing room with the rest of the girls, and her boss comes in with the security guard, and they say, hey, there is a Russian guy, Annie, and we know you speak Russian, so can you go and interact with him and try to make him feel comfortable at the club? Basically do her job. Disgruntled, she essentially agrees, and she goes over, and that's when we are first introduced to Vanya, the guy Annie's supposed to fall in love with. Vanya, for whatever reason, is at the club with a few of his friends. Annie comes over, she sits down, she, finesses him a little bit with her Russian. And at first you think, oh, does she actually know Russian? Or like, what is it? Or has she been lying to her bosses and everyone just thinks she knows Russian and she doesn't? But no, she understands it pretty decently. She just can't speak it that well. She goes and brings him to the private room. They get to the private room and she does her dance for him. He pays her, of course. They have a great time together. At the end, she tells him, I don't usually do this. And she takes her underwear off and gives him like a nice exclusive type of dance. After that, they go back to his friends in the common area of the club. They party a little bit longer and she gives him his number because he says he wants her again, essentially to come over to his house or whatever. Then fast forward for the end of the day, she's going home. It's early in the morning. She's exhausted. Annie finally arrives home. That's when we're introduced to her sister, who doesn't matter in this movie at all. I don't even know why I'm bringing her up. Then, while she's still at home, Vanya calls her. She gets excited. She changes, takes an Uber to his house. That's when we see Vanya has a huge mansion. She gets in the house, and she's like, wow, this is a nice house. Vanya's like, yeah, da-da-da-da. They go upstairs quickly, actually. They don't talk that much and interact that much. They go upstairs to his bedroom and they have intercourse, Vanya and Annie, for the first time. Now, if I didn't say this before, Annie is short for Anora. Annie is the name that Anora prefers rather than her legal name, Anora. Even at the club, she does not even use a side name, a nickname, or dancer name. She just uses her nickname, Annie. And I was like, have these people never met an exotic dancer before? Like the creators, because I'm like, every exotic dancer, if not most, would never use a nickname that can be traced back to their legal name. They always use an alias, a random alias that has nothing to do with them. I honestly found that just like, I guess. And so after they finished hooking up, Annie and Vanya, they talk a little bit. He essentially pays her and they talk a little bit more, and flash forward to New Year's Eve, where Annie was invited back to his house and she brought one of her dancer friends. They go and they have a lot of fun. There's a bunch of drugs. There's a bunch of drinking, a bunch of partying, because it's New Year's Eve at Vanya's mansion. They all have a great time. The dancer friend who she brought along couldn't believe it because like, wow, you were right. He's rich. He's loaded. Now, how was Vanya loaded? Vanya's essentially loaded from his parents or his dad. His dad is a big businessman in Russia, and Vanya lives in America, but Vanya doesn't want to work for his dad, but is able to live in the mansion and have money and all expenses paid, of course, and live lavishly in New York City. I think his dad was like a billionaire or something like that. He's a businessman. They don't really specify what kind of business he does. They just say he's a Russian businessman, Vanya's dad. Anyways, During New Year's, everyone says, oh, Happy New Year's. Yay, that's fun. Vanya then asks Annie to stay over for New Year's. She stays over, of course, like that because she wants to get paid. And she tells him that, hey, it's actually holiday rates now, so you have to pay extra. She's just finessing. And I'm like, yeah, girl, go for it. Go figure. The next morning, they come to. Annie wakes up. She's like, oh, okay. She has to get going, of course. So she starts getting dressed. Vanya says, wait, where are you going? And Vanya tells her, okay, well, how can I get exclusively you? Can I get you exclusively for a week? And she's like, yeah, but you have to pay. And he's like, okay, how about 10K? She's like, how about 15? And he's like, okay, deal. And she was like, I would have did it for 10. And he tells her, well, if I were you, I would have not gone lower than $30,000. She laughs, they giggle, which is supposed to show like maybe they have a connection, which I still have not seen that they have a connection, just having a bunch of sex, intercourse. And throughout this movie, you're going to see a few times them having intercourse, especially in the first half. And I am a firm believer that the reason this was nominated is because of the nudity and the crassness of this movie. Because I'm gonna give my opinion then. Let me stop. Let me just keep going, telling a story. I'm very frustrated about this movie. I'm gonna keep telling the story though, okay? Anyways, after they agree on the 15K, Annie goes to her house, packs all her stuff so she can be there for a week because he wants her for the week. She goes back to his house. They have a little bit more fun. And then Vanya's like, let's all go to Vegas. So Vanya and his friends and Annie all take a private jet to Vegas, to the private suite that they like to stay at, or Vanya likes to stay at. And they have a ball there. They have fun. They're just showing them having all this fun in this amazing penthouse in Vegas and a nice hotel. Then Annie and Vanya, after having intimate intercourse, they're talking and discussing things. And Vanya's telling Annie, let's get married. Annie thinks she's joking. She's like, no, you have to be serious. You can't play with me like this, blah, blah, blah. All that jazz. He's like, no, I am serious. Let's get married. They go get married in Vegas at some little eloping, those fast express marriages. They run there and she tells him, you have to get me a 4-carat ring. They get the ring, head there, get married, and now they're married in Vegas. Little tidbit, because Vanya is the son of a Russian billionaire, they have henchmen everywhere. And once they get back to New York, Vanya and Annie, word gets out that Vanya got married to a hooker. That's what all they kept saying, to a hooker. And they say some more like ruder words, but I'll just leave that, a hooker. So no one believes it because they're like, wait, no, like Vanya would have told us if he got married. And I'm sure he wouldn't be that stupid to get married to a hooker. Vanya's father calls one of the henchmen in New York who's supposed to be looking after Vanya, yells at him a little bit and says, you better go check on Vanya and see if he's actually married or not, because this is what the tabloids are saying. This is what people are saying. This is the rumor. And that rumor, I guess, went all the way to Russia quick. While Vanya and Annie are in the mansion relaxing, Annie's trying to get a sense of Vanya in the moment. And she's like, hey, like, when am I going to meet your parents? Like, are they nice? How do they think about this? Like, what your dad say? And Vanya's just playing a ring around the rosy with his answers. He's not really answering her. He's trying to like change the subject. He asks her like, oh, like, what about your family? And she's like, oh, she's ditzy in that moment and just starts talking about her family. Then a little bit later on, you get a knock at the door and you see bodyguard 1 and bodyguard 2. The henchman that Vanya's billionaire father called was Toros. Toros is Armenian and kind of runs like a security / business with the billionaire dad. So Toros tells bodyguard 1 and bodyguard 2 to go to the mansion while he's on his way and find out if Vanya is actually married to a hooker. So bodyguard 1 and bodyguard 2 are at the door. And they try to like bust open and stuff like that because Vanya doesn't want to let them in. And finally they get in. They just talk to Vanya. They're like, hey, we're here to just talk to you. They work for Vanya's father, so they can't really hurt him. So they said, wait, like, who's this girl? Is this the hooker? And she's upset. She's like, hooker? How dare you? I'm his wife. That's all she keeps saying. And so they were like, are you guys really married? I was like, yeah, I'm really married. And they were like, what? Toros is on the phone, the henchman, and he's screaming. They're all speaking in Russian. She's speaking in English. They're speaking in Russian mostly. So like you see the subtitles, and Toros is really upset, trying to figure out why would Vanya do this. Like he's going to be in so much trouble. And he's telling Vanya, you've really done it. You messed up so bad, Vanya, that your parents are coming to New York and they'll be here tomorrow. Vanya is shocked. Toros also tells him over the speaker that you brought shame to your family, all this jazz. Annie is sitting there shocked, but I'm like, girl, like, you don't really know this man, but also, like, obviously he didn't tell his parents about you. And she's trying to get answers from Vanya. And she's like, Vanya, is this true? Is this true? After seeing the marriage certificate, the bodyguard 1 and bodyguard 2, they said, okay, we have to keep you guys here and make sure you guys are safe. So when Vanya's parents come tomorrow, we can get this annulled. That's the plan. And he's like, I'm not getting this annulled. I'm not doing that. What? I'm not getting this annulled. And they're like, no, you have to get this annulled. Like this is like, they're trying to figure out any which way to explain to her, no, she has to get this annulled. Like, no, I'm not getting this annulled. So Vanya and Annie are like, no, we're going to leave. Let's go. Let's go. They can't hold you here. They work for you. They work for your father. So Vanya's like, okay, let's go. Annie starts going upstairs. She's like, okay, I'm going to grab my bags and then we can go. And Vanya's like, no, we have to go now. Like, let's go now. And Annie's like, no, I have to get my bags. Vanya just sprints for her and he runs out of the house. Bodyguard 1 chases after him but slips on ice and Vanya just runs away. Annie's like, what the heck? And she tries to run after him and Bodyguard 2 stops her. And Bodyguard 2 and Annie start going at it. Essentially, Annie starts beating him up. She punches him in the face, all that jazz. And this is where I get a bit uncomfortable. And you can tell it's an uncomfortable scene because nothing bad happens to Annie, nothing inappropriate happens to Annie per se. I'll explain it now. Bodyguard 2, you punch me in the face, and then she starts throwing stuff at him, so he tackles her and essentially ties Annie's hands up with like some cord or whatever. Ties her up, and like she's still fighting him. And when Bodyguard 1 comes back and like he's trying to like keep her down, but like she's bent over on the couch and he's like behind her. And so it looks inappropriate. And Bodyguard 1's like, what the heck, da da da. Nothing inappropriate's happening. He's just trying to restrain her, Bodyguard 2. But it just looks weird. And I was just like, what are they trying to do with this scene? This scene is so freaking scary. Imagine you're a woman, whether in that circumstance or not, and like these guys you don't even know, speaking a different language that you kind of understand, are like trying to restrain you. And she doesn't know what's gonna, like, I'll be fighting for my life as well. Finally, they push her down. Taurus comes in. Taurus is like, what the heck happened? Bodyguard 1 is like hit in the face by Annie as well with her feet, so she breaks his nose. So Taurus is like, what, like, how, this little girl did all that? And untie her. They're trying to figure out, like, get her up, like, untie her, like, she needs to be okay, like, I'm so sorry about this, we're gonna figure this out. Bodyguard 1 and Bodyguard 2 obviously have to listen to Taurus, because Taurus is the main henchman, he's their boss. And so Annie's like screaming at him like, I'm the wife, we're not gonna get annulled. Taurus is trying to tell her and explain to her, no, you're getting this annulled. Like, I'm sure you have a criminal record, because you know you're a hooker, and I'm sure you've done a lot of bad things in your life, so we can say money laundering, assault, coercion. They start naming all these different things that he can get her charged for. And she's like, oh, okay. And she's like, well, I'm married to him. Like, why would I want to get annulment? She told him, like, I'm married. Look at my ring. We have a ring. They take the ring from her, that 4-carat beautiful ring. And she's like, no. And she starts screaming, R-A-P-E. She starts screaming R-A-P-E, which in that situation, who wouldn't do that? Because it's just like, you're in that weird situation with these guys. And it's scary, and you don't know what else to do because they still have you tied up still, even though you need to be let go. And I just found it scary in a way. Like, not scary. I found that scene in that mansion with that whole like fighting situation happening and like restraining her, I found it very troubling and very concerning that they would put that scene in the movie, because this is supposed to be a comedy. Let's not forget, it's supposed to be a comedy. Romance comedy. It's not. That's not funny. That's really weird. So they gag her, and then they tell her, like, hey, we will let you go if you help us find Vanya, and if you agree to the $10K in annulment. And she's like, okay, yep, okay, like, I'll agree to it. She agrees to it, and she's like, yep, I'll help you for Vanya. Then they become the 4 Stooges instead of the 3 Stooges. So it's Taurus, Bodyguard 1, Bodyguard 2, and Annie. They go on a search around the city for Vanya. They search everywhere, high and low, and their interactions with each other, it all becomes very random. So With this part of the movie, which I would consider Act 2, it's very hangover vibes. It's supposed to be very funny. They're talking over each other. There's cross dialogue where they're all just interacting with each other at the same time, having 2 different conversations at the same time, and just yelling at each other, all that jazz, in Russian and in English. It's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be just a realistic, of a familial type of situation for this second part of the movie. And it's supposed to be very hangover vibes, very random. You don't know what's going to happen next, where they're going to go to next, things like that. They end up going to the friends who works at a candy shop, and they bust all of the glass in the candy shop because they don't know where Vanya is. And then they go to get their car. The car's about to get towed. Toro says, nope, my truck is not getting towed. He pulls the truck out, and they race off to go to a diner to try to find out, like, hey, does anyone know this guy? They go in, they ask, does anyone know him? They show pictures around, no one knows him. And Toro starts getting into it with these guys while everyone's eating, and they're just trying to have a relaxed time, but Tauros, of course, is Toro. So they're trying to make it like more familial, very funny, very My Big Fat Greek Wedding type of like humor, or like acting, should I say. After that, a scene pops up where Vanya goes back into the strip club that Annie works at, or worked at. And luckily, Annie's friend who's there, she texts Annie and tells her, like, hey, Vanya just came in. Like, he's going to dance with the girl you hate. So Annie tells everyone, hey, like, I found him. He's going to HQ. HQ's, like, the name of the dancer club, exotic dancer club. And so they like, yay, okay, we found him. So they go to the dancer club, find which private room he's in, getting a private dancer from. Annie's nemesis grabs him. They start leaving. They go out, and Annie gets in a fight with her nemesis while trying to leave the club, and they go out at her and the girl. She still ends up leaving and things like that. Nothing crazy happens. No insane bruises. They get Vanya in the car. Annie's yelling, telling Vanya, "You don't have to listen to these guys. We're married. We're legally married. We don't have to listen to these guys. We don't have to get an annulment. Vanya, listen to me." But Vanya's been either drunk, messed up, high, like most of the movie. Vanya's in the car just out of it, and Annie's just like, whatever. So she gets in the car as well, and Toros drives everyone to the courthouse where the family has a lawyer. The lawyer takes them all up into the judge and tells them, like, hey, you guys better get him together because he seems drunk and out of it, and that's not going to get cleared if he's drunk in the courthouse by the judge. And when they get to the courthouse, Annie starts telling the judge, no, this isn't right, because we are married, da-da-da. And she's like, yeah, we got married in Vegas. And the lawyer's like, wait, what? And then he looks at Taurus, he's like, they got married in Vegas? They can't get an annulment. They can apply for one, but like, it's out of state. So because they were married in another state, they have to go to that state. They can't just get an annulment in New York because they got married in Vegas. It doesn't work that way in America. You have to go to the state you got married in and get that annulment. Taurus is upset, of course. He's like, what the heck? So they're like, whatever, your parents are coming now. We can sort this out with their parents. They go to the private jet airport, wherever that is, in New York City, and they're waiting in the waiting room. Vanya, Annie, Taurus, Bodyguard 1, and Bodyguard 2. Just sitting there waiting. And finally, the parents come, dad and mom. The mom looks great. She comes to Vanya. Vanya, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Are you crazy? You married a hooker? You married a prostitute? You married blah, blah, blah. Annie's right there. And she's like, what? Like, hello? And the mom's ignoring her, of course, and still talking to Vanya. Like, what is wrong with you? Are you drunk? Like, you smell. Blah, blah. And Annie's like, hey, like, I'm his wife. Nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. The mom says something snarky to her. And Annie's like snaps back a little bit, but not really. And they go to the private jet and said, nope, you guys got married in Vegas. Are you joking? So they knew they had to fly to Vegas. So they all get in the private jet. Annie doesn't want to at first because she's mad at Vanya for not sticking up for her, for not really being a man. And so Vanya tells her, like, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you expect from me? And Annie realizes in that moment that she shouldn't expect much from Vanya. She gets on the private jet with Bodyguard 2 because her and Bodyguard 2 are kind of like trying to interact, but she hates Bodyguard 2. Remember, he tied her up and all that weird stuff, so she feels kind of assaulted by him, so she doesn't really trust him like that. So they go all the way to Vegas, go to the lawyer, sign the paperwork, and Annie signs it as well. She goes off with the mom before she leaves, and Bodyguard 2 tries to tell them, like, I think Vanya owes Annie an apology for like what happened. And the mom is like, no, my son's not going to apologize to a hooker. And Annie's still offended by that word and goes off on the mom a little bit more. the dad of Vanya starts laughing because he thinks this whole scenario is just very funny. Because again, in these movies, the mom or the matriarch in the family is always seen as a hard behind or taking things too serious, while the dad, who's supposed to be the businessman, the billionaire, is just all full of life and laughter and ease, not taking anything serious. But somehow he became a billionaire. Bodyguard 1, Bodyguard 2, and Annie fly back to New York from Vegas on coach instead of private now because, of course, they got an annulment. Annie and Bodyguard 2 stay overnight at the mansion. I'm not sure how that worked either because I'm like, okay, Vanya, his mom and dad flew back to Russia, of course, but like you were just able to go in his mansion, his parents' mansion, and just have a great night, a great sleep. But I guess her stuff was there, so she had to get there anyways. So I guess, but Bodyguard 2 and her just talk about stuff, and they just are smoking Mary Jane. And Bodyguard 2 is telling her like, oh, you know, like talk about stuff with me. And Annie's telling him like, no, I don't trust you. You tried to assault me. He's like, oh, I didn't try to assault you. Like, what do you mean? You're the one who hit me. And she's like, you tied me up. And he's just not getting it. And like this is supposed to be like a flirty, like Pretty Woman type of moment between Bodyguard 2 and Annie. I don't get it. Fast forward the next day. They're driving, presumably because Bodyguard 2 is going to drop Annie off at her house. Bodyguard 2 drives up to her house, stops. He's like, okay, we're here. Before she gets out of the car, Bodyguard 2 gives her ring that he took off. And he says, don't tell Toros I gave this to you. Because that ring's worth a lot, honey. And he gives her that ring. He goes out of the car, brings her back up to her apartment or her townhouse or whatever that she lives with her sister at. And goes back down to the car. And he's like, hey, what's wrong? And Annie's just shocked that he would do such a kind gesture to her now. And she doesn't know what to say. So she gets on top of him, rubs him out one, and then they start having intercourse. And Bodyguard 2 tries to kiss her, and then she starts hitting him. And I guess to get the frustration out, and then she starts crying. Just the whole scenario with Vanya was traumatizing to her. That's why she starts beating him and crying at the end. And that's the end of the movie. Now, that was a lot. I know. I talked a little bit faster than normal because I really just was trying to remember what happened in this freaking movie. I know. This was not a good movie at all to me. And before I go on to my rant, let's talk about the acting. The acting was fine. I found that Annie, played by Mikey Madison, she did fine. Like, it wasn't an outstanding job. She has the weakest performance so far that I've seen for the Best Actress nomination at the Oscars. And then we have Vanya. Vanya did okay acting. Supposed to be an aloof, like childlike guy. He did fine. Bodyguard 1, Bodyguard 2 did fine. And Toros did fine. Like, the acting was not really the issue. It was supposed to be like a hangover type of comedy on the second half of the movie. So I get it. Now, the writing, the script. Not good. Not good enough. Not Oscar worthy. I found that the second half of the movie, the script is a lot better. The writing was a little bit better, especially them talking over each other. But I think that's what hit it. Because in the beginning, when they just had to talk a little bit, they didn't have much dialogue throughout the whole beginning of the movie. They just had a few words here, a few lines there. It was more expressions and movement and sex, intercourse, throughout the first half of the movie. So you really didn't get much out of it. The second half, I think them overlapping on their speaking and dialogue hid the fact that the writing was bad and the scripts were not the strongest. Like, they weren't saying anything really crazy. It was just a lot of profanities. It was a lot. Now, I want to talk about the visuals because I saw one promotion on YouTube where a guy who does a lot of videography type of reviews about movies was saying, like, why does Anora look so beautiful? It doesn't. It doesn't, guys. That guy lied. I think that if you're really into film, then you may notice differences between this film and other films, and this may be a tad bit more beautiful for the eyes. But me, a person who watches a lot of movies, there wasn't really a big difference. To me, it wasn't shot well. But again, as a comedy, I understand that it needs to be shot a certain type of way, and they're going for more of the hangover vibes in certain aspects. So I got why they shot that way. Was it beautiful? No, we're not talking about Avatar here. We're not talking about Game of Thrones. Like, some people overdo it because they want to have content out on YouTube. But, like, They were exaggerating, child. There are a lot of sex intercourse scenes. I want to say there's about 7 to 8. It's too many. Now, would this movie have been nominated for an Oscar if the creators were ex-sex workers or intercourse workers?
Nope.
Would they be still nominated for an Oscar as Best Actress or other categories in this year's Oscars if they were ex-sex workers?
Nope.
We know the answer is no. Especially with that amount of sex scenes, we know the answer is no. The reason this movie is nominated for an Oscar is because of what I said last week with The Substance. For some reason, they want to showcase boobs, sex in some of these movies, and it's kind of ridiculous. Last week was the horror movie The Substance, where again it was just a lot of like nudity and like about the body parts, but it fit in the film because we understood kind of what they were going for. And this week with this comedy / romance of Anora, this is just sex, hands down. Like, it's a lot, and I don't think the scenes were even shot well. I don't think the scenes were nice to look at. Those scenes didn't get me like excited in any way or like uncomfortable in any way. They were just there. It was just like ugly. But I understand why it's nominated, because you have to have those prostitute type of movies for the Oscars. Before, those were a dozen a dime where you saw nudity at the Oscars nominations, but now it's just like, okay, yeah, the hardcore sex, we need sex. And it's just like, this movie wasn't good. Y'all just like the sex scenes, Academy. Just say that. The dialogue wasn't good enough. Now, if you've seen Anora, you know that her acting, Anora, Annie, aka Mikey Madison, was the weakest so far out of the Best Actress nominations. She had the weakest performance. It was not a strong performance. She did an okay Brooklyn accent, but it wasn't good. Like, it was okay. It was like, we all can do that stereotypical Italian Brooklyn accent. That's what she kind of gave. But it wasn't like a great accent. It wasn't like a great, outstanding performance. She's just a pretty white girl who's skinny, who did a stripper movie with a lot of nudity and sex. All that together is going to get nominated for an Oscar. That's how it works. So a lot of people who say, oh, this is a great movie. Oh, I love this movie. This is a great movie. I'm seeing people say that on the Academy when they promoted some scenes from the Anora. Oh, this is a great movie. I cried at the end when she broke down crying after having sex. The girls that listen to Billie Eilish and are depressed all the time and suicidal all the time and are desperate for love and desperate to be saved by a billionaire guy who doesn't love them, those are the girls that said this movie was good and that said they were emotionally touched by this movie. The girls that have no substance in their life. The girls that have no life to live. The girls who have morals until they meet a guy. The girls who are goody two-shoes but see themselves in a white girl who's skinny and a stripper. These women think Anora was a masterpiece, especially at the end when they all cried with her. Because they understood. Girl, you are 18 years old, going to university, who's never really had to struggle in their life. What the heck do you know about what's going on with the stripper girl from Brooklyn, who just got married to a billionaire? The infantilization of escorting and white women is insane. I don't like it. I don't think it's cute. I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's righteous. I don't think it's like, oh, wow. It's like, kind of like how they turned Marilyn Monroe into a martyr all of a sudden for white women. And I was just like, yeah. She was an okay actress, but at the end of the day, she was a sex symbol. But they try to turn people into martyrs, into like great human beings. They had a rough life. They just misunderstood women. Give me a fucking break. Anora was all right. It's not Oscar worthy. It is a Netflix streaming movie, how it's shot, how it's edited, the lighting, the scenes. They scream Netflix. The songs, there's more songs than freaking dialogue in this movie. And those songs sound like a Love Island playlist. This sounds like 365 days. If you close your eyes and listen to this whole review, it's given 365 days, but in Brooklyn with a stripper. I'm over it. I'm over these sex and sexual movies where it's just like these very boring women and men will watch these movies that, oh, these were so good. No, you just like the sex scenes. They weren't good movies. You're lacking in life and you lived vicariously through Anora because your life is so freaking boring, or you're just not excited with anything that's going on with your life. So you're just like, oh my gosh, I can relate to her. You can't relate to her, ho. Now that's the end of my rant. Comedy, romance, Anora. Last week was a horror, The Substance. They're doing all different genres for the Best Actress category this year. Previously, these categories and genres would not have really been nominated previously, especially pre-pandemic. Like, it would be a hard knock life for a comedy, maybe a romance, but not a comedy, to be even nominated for a Best Actress. Like, that's a hard thing. And then horror with The Substance, that's another hard category. Like, that doesn't happen for Best Actress. Is this movie a comedy / romance, Anora? No, it's not a comedy with those cross dialogue when they're all talking at the same time. Haha, yeah, that's funny. It's humorous. It's not funny. Romance? What romance happened in this freaking movie? She's a hooker. And even though she hated the word hooker, girl, you were a dancer, but also on the side, we're having sex for money with Vana. You are an escort / hooker. Like, what's the problem? It was like Pretty Woman had a baby with The Hangover, and then this just came out. Anyways, that's the end of my review. What would I give this movie out of 5 stars? I would give this movie a 2 out of 5 stars. As a whole, was it better than Amelia Perez? Yeah, because Amelia Perez shouldn't have been a musical to me. But Carla's performance is still a lot better on its own than Mikey Madison's performance. Mikey Madison's performance is the weakest out of the lot so far. The weakest. So I give this movie a 2 out of 5 as a whole. It's good enough, I guess. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of It Girl in Review with me, Jay Gibson. Thank you guys so much for watching Anora and listening to me talk about Anora with me. Hopefully you survived the whole video and got to the end. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and comment below. Do you agree with my analysis of Anora? Should Anora, the movie, have been nominated for a freaking Oscar? For Best Actress at that. Now, thank you guys so much. See you guys next week for another Oscar-nominated movie, okay? Ciao!